Officer Bradley Collins swore to tell the whole truth, completely unaware that the quiet black woman sitting across the courtroom wasn't a defenseless civilian. He smirked, ready to ruin her life with fabricated charges, oblivious that he had just committed perjury against a highly decorated commander in naval special warfare. Sunlight sliced through the tall, arched windows of courtroom 302 inches, the Duval County Courthouse, catching the dust motes dancing in the heavy, tense air. The room was deathly quiet, save for the rhythmic squeak of the witness stand chair. Seated in that chair was Officer Bradley Collins, a 12-year veteran of the Jacksonville Police Department. He was a large man, standing 6'2" and weighing an imposing 220 pounds, with a perfectly pressed uniform and a confident, almost arrogant posture. At the defense table sat Maya Reynolds. She wore a tailored, understated charcoal gray suit. Her posture was remarkably straight, her hands resting calmly on the table, folded one over the other. She displayed absolutely no emotion. To the casual observer in the gallery, she looked like an ordinary middle-class woman, perhaps an accountant or a high school teacher, caught in a terrifying legal nightmare. She was facing charges of aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer, resisting arrest with violence, and reckless driving. If convicted, she was looking at a minimum of 15 years in a state penitentiary. Prosecutor Jessica Vargas, a sharp attorney with a reputation for securing convictions, paced slowly before the witness stand. "Officer Collins," Vargas began, her voice projecting clearly to the jury box, "let us take you back to the night of October 14th. Could you please tell the court what transpired when you initiated a traffic stop on the defendant's vehicle on Highway 41? Collins leaned toward the microphone, his expression hardening into a mask of righteous indignation. "Yes, ma'am. It was around 2,300 hours, 11 p.m. It was raining heavily. I observed a black SUV traveling at a high rate of speed, clocked by my radar at 94 miles per hour in a 65 zone. The vehicle was swerving erratically across the dashed lines. I activated my lights and sirens, initiating a standard traffic stop." "And did the driver pull over immediately?" Vargas asked. "No, ma'am. She continued for another mile and a half before finally jerking the vehicle onto the muddy shoulder near the mile marker 114 exit." Collins shook his head, looking directly at the jury. "As soon as the vehicle stopped, before I even had a chance to run the plates or call in the stop, the driver's side door flew open." Maya blinked once. She remembered the night perfectly. She remembered pulling over safely the moment the lights flashed. She remembered keeping her hands visible on the steering wheel, just as she had been trained, just as any sensible person would do. But she remained silent, letting the officer dig his grave. "What happened next, Officer Collins?" "The defendant, Miss Reynolds, stepped out of the vehicle. She was highly agitated, screaming profanities at me. I ordered her back into her vehicle multiple times. She refused. I approached with my hand on my service weapon, strictly following protocol, and ordered her to place her hands on the roof of her car." Collins took a dramatic pause, letting the silence hang. "She lunged at me. It was entirely unprovoked. I reached out to secure her arm to place her under arrest for failing to comply with a lawful order. The moment my hand made contact with her wrist, she grabbed my uniform, pivoted, and executed some kind of martial arts throw. She slammed me into the wet asphalt with incredible force. I struck my head, momentarily disorienting me. She then attempted to reach for my duty belt. Gasps rippled through the small gallery. The jury looked horrified. An unprovoked, violent attack on a police officer on a dark, rainy highway was a prosecutor's dream narrative. "She tried to take your weapon?" Vargas asked, her voice tight with orchestrated shock. "That was my immediate assessment. Yes," Collins lied smoothly. "Fearing for my life, I managed to create distance, draw my taser, and deploy it. Only then was I able to subdue her, place her in handcuffs, and call for emergency backup." Vargas nodded sympathetically. "Officer Collins, you sustained injuries that night, correct?" "Yes. A severe concussion, a sprained rotator cuff, and heavy bruising along my spine from where I impacted the road. I was on medical leave for 3 weeks. And what of your body camera footage? I'm sure the jury would like to see this harrowing encounter." Collins sighed, a picture of regret. Unfortunately, during the violent struggle and the heavy rain, the mounting clip on my body camera snapped. The device fell onto the highway and was subsequently crushed by a passing semi-truck before backup arrived. The data card was completely destroyed. It was a neat, tidy story. A violent, erratic civilian, a brave officer defending his life, and an unfortunate technical failure that eliminated any objective record of the event. Collins had told this exact lie to Internal Affairs, to the grand jury, and now to a trial jury. It had worked for him before with other suspects who lacked the resources to fight back. He looked over at Maya, expecting to see fear, panic, or angry tears. Instead, Maya's eyes met his. They were dark, entirely unreadable, and chillingly calm. She didn't look like prey. She looked like a predator observing a very stupid mouse. At the defense table, attorney David Arrington scribbled a final note on his yellow legal pad. Arrington was a seasoned defense lawyer, a man who had spent 30 years dismantling lying cops on the stand. He wore a slightly rumpled navy suit, his reading glasses perched near the end of his nose. He leaned over to Maya and whispered, "He's fully committed. He just locked himself into a perjury trap he can never escape." "Let him talk," Maya whispered back, her voice barely a breath. "Give him enough rope." Vargas concluded her direct examination with a flourish. "Thank you, Officer Collins. Your bravery is a credit to the badge. No further questions, Your Honor." Judge Owen Pendleton, a stern man with a shock of white hair and zero tolerance for courtroom theatrics, looked down from the bench. "Mr. Arrington, your witness." David Arrington stood up slowly, buttoning his suit jacket. He didn't rush to the podium. He took his time, letting the tension in the room stretch until it was almost uncomfortable. He picked up a single sheet of paper, adjusted his glasses, and looked up at the witness. "Good morning, Officer Collins," Arrington said, his tone conversational, almost friendly. "Good morning, Counselor," Collins replied, guarded but confident. "I want to make sure I completely understand the sequence of events you just described so vividly for the jury. You are a large man, Officer Collins. Your official department physical lists you at 6'2", 220 pounds. Is that correct?" "That is correct." "And you undergo regular physical training? Defensive tactics, hand-to-hand combatives, submission holds?" "We have mandatory training every quarter, yes. Plus, I hit the gym 5 days a week," Collins stated proudly, puffing out his chest slightly. "Impressive," Arrington nodded. He turned and pointed toward the defense table. "My client, Miss Reynolds, according to her booking intake, stands 5'6" and weighs exactly 142 pounds. Does that sound accurate to your observation?" "I don't carry a scale, Counselor, but sure. Sounds about right." "So, to be clear," Arrington walked slowly toward the jury box. "You, a highly trained, 220-pound police officer, were instantly and completely physically overpowered by a woman 80 pounds lighter than you, who executed a flawless tactical throw that sent you airborne." Collins bristled. Size isn't everything in a street fight. She had the element of surprise. She was enraged. Like I said, it was completely unprovoked. People can do crazy things when they're desperate. "Desperate?" Arrington echoed. "Did you find any illegal narcotics in my client's vehicle?" "No." "Any illegal firearms?" "No." "Any active warrants for her arrest?" "No." So, a 34-year-old woman with a spotless driving record, zero criminal history, and no contraband in her car, suddenly decided to exit her vehicle in the pouring rain and physically assault an armed police officer out of pure, unprovoked desperation? Prosecutor Vargas jumped to her feet. "Objection, Your Honor." "Argumentative." "Sustained," Judge Pendleton rumbled. "Tone it down, Mr. Arrington." "My apologies, Your Honor," Arrington said smoothly, completely unbothered. He turned back to Collins. "Let's talk about this throw. You testified under oath that when you grabbed her wrist, she grabbed your uniform, pivoted, and threw you to the ground. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Can you describe the grip she used? Did she grab your lapel, your belt?" Collins hesitated for a fraction of a second. "She grabbed my uniform shirt near the collar. She used my own forward momentum against me. It happened very fast. I see. And you testified that she then tried to reach for your duty weapon while you were on the ground? Yes. She lunged for my holster. But she didn't get it? I fought her off and managed to deploy my taser. Arrington nodded slowly, walking back to his table. He picked up a thick manila folder. Officer Collins, you also testified that your body camera was destroyed. The mounting clip broke, it fell to the highway, and a truck ran it over. That's the truth, Collins said firmly. It is an incredible piece of bad luck, Arrington mused, especially considering your squad car's dash camera also experienced a critical software failure that exact same night, preventing any footage of the stop from being saved to the department's cloud server. 2 separate camera failures within 5 minutes of each other. Collins gripped the edges of the witness box. The IT department said it was a glitch with the server syncing. It happens. It's out of my control. Right. Glitches. Arrington smiled. A sharp, dangerous smile. Officer Collins. Are you aware that Highway 41, specifically the stretch near mile marker 114, is a designated hazardous materials transport route? Collins frowned, clearly confused by the pivot. I guess so. What does that have to do with anything? It means, Arrington said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying a sudden heavy weight, that the Department of Transportation maintains high-definition, infrared traffic enforcement cameras every half-mile along that specific corridor. Cameras that don't suffer from glitches. Cameras that are hardwired directly into the Federal Highway Database, not your local precinct's cloud server. The color drained from Officer Bradley Collins's face. It was a subtle shift, but to the trained eye, it was the look of a man who suddenly realized he was standing on a trapdoor. Prosecutor Vargas shifted uneasily in her seat. Your Honor, Arrington said, turning to Judge Pendleton. At this time, the defense would like to enter into evidence, Defense Exhibit D, a subpoenaed, unedited, 4-minute video file obtained directly from the Florida Department of Transportation, time-stamped October 14th, 2000, 304 hours. Vargas was on her feet instantly. Objection, Your Honor. The prosecution was never provided with this video in discovery. This is an ambush. Your Honor, Arrington countered smoothly. The prosecution provided us with an evidence log stating all video of the incident was destroyed or corrupted. We conducted our own independent investigation and secured this footage merely 48 hours ago. We submitted the supplemental discovery file to the prosecutor's electronic portal yesterday evening. If Miss Vargas failed to check her digital inbox, that is not the fault of the defense. This video is the only objective record of the incident. Judge Pendleton scowled, looking over his glasses at Vargas. Is that true, Counselor? Did the defense upload the file to the portal? Vargas frantically clicked her laptop mouse, her face flushing red as she saw the notification she had ignored the night before. Yes, Your Honor. It appears it was uploaded, but I haven't reviewed it. Then you will review it along with the rest of us right now, Judge Pendleton ordered. Admitted. Proceed, Mr. Arrington. Arrington walked over to the AV cart and plugged a flash drive into the laptop connected to the courtroom's large monitor. The screen flickered to life. The courtroom collectively held its breath. The footage was grainy, shot from a high angle in the rain, but the infrared technology cut through the darkness beautifully. It showed Collins's cruiser, lights flashing, pulling up behind Maya's dark SUV on the shoulder. The video began to play. It showed a reality completely detached from the sworn testimony the jury had just heard. The video showed Maya Reynolds' vehicle parked perfectly on the shoulder. It showed Officer Collins getting out of his cruiser, not cautiously, but aggressively. He didn't walk to her window. He stormed up to it. The video showed Maya handing him what appeared to be her license and registration. Then, without warning, Collins ripped the driver's side door open. A collective gasp echoed in the courtroom. The footage clearly showed Collins reaching in, grabbing Maya by the hair and the collar of her jacket, and violently dragging her out of the vehicle into the rain. Maya did not scream or flail. She didn't lunge at him. As Collins raised his fist to strike the smaller woman, the true nature of Maya Reynolds finally bled into the frame. The jury watched in stunned silence as Maya's hands moved with terrifying, mechanical precision. She didn't execute a wild, desperate street brawl throw. With a movement so fast the camera barely caught it, Maya trapped Collins's striking arm, stepped into his guard, and executed a flawless, devastatingly precise joint manipulation that snapped his wrist inward. She swept his legs out from under him, dropping the 220-pound officer face first onto the asphalt in less than a second. She didn't reach for his gun. She didn't strike him while he was down. She simply placed her knee precisely on the back of his neck, pinned his arm behind his back in a crippling control hold, and stayed completely motionless, neutralizing the threat with textbook military efficiency until the backup cruisers arrived minutes later. Arrington paused the video right as Maya had Collins pinned to the pavement. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Arrington turned slowly back to the witness stand. Officer Collins was sweating profusely, his jaw clenched, his eyes darting toward the exits. "Officer Collins," Arrington said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "You testified you were attacked by a desperate, aggressive civilian. But looking at this video, it doesn't look like my client was desperate at all. It looks like she showed incredible restraint. Tell me, officer, in your 12 years on the force, have you ever seen a civilian execute a Level 4 compliance hold used exclusively by Tier 1 Special Operations personnel?" Collins opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The trap hadn't just sprung, it had crushed him completely, and the defense wasn't even close to being done. The silence in courtroom 302 was thick enough to choke on. The grainy, high-contrast infrared footage of Officer Bradley Collins being folded like a cheap card table by a woman 80 pounds, his junior remained frozen on the large monitor. David Arrington leaned against the wooden podium, letting the visual sink deep into the minds of the 12 jurors. He looked at Collins, whose arrogant posture had completely dissolved. The large officer was now hunched forward, his hands trembling slightly where they gripped the edge of the witness stand. "Officer Collins." Arrington broke the silence, his voice sharp and carrying a distinct edge of contempt. "I want to remind you that you are still under oath. You swore to this court, to this jury, and to your creator that my client launched an unprovoked, wild attack on you. Yet, the Department of Transportation's unblinking eye shows you assaulting her, and her neutralizing you with what can only be described as professional, calculated restraint. Do you wish to revise your testimony?" Collins swallowed hard. His eyes darted toward Prosecutor Jessica Vargas, silently pleading for a lifeline. Vargas stared resolutely at her legal pad, her face pale. She knew a sinking ship when she was on one. The video is out of context," Collins stammered, his voice lacking any of its previous booming authority. "It was dark. I slipped on the wet asphalt. She got lucky." Arrington let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "She got lucky. She perfectly executed an Osoto Gari sweep, transitioning into a modified Kimura lock because she got lucky in the rain. Tell me, officer, when you were on the ground, pinned, why didn't she take your weapon? Why didn't she strike you? If she was an enraged, desperate criminal, as you claimed, why did she simply hold you immobile until your backup arrived?" "I don't know," Collins snapped, his voice cracking. "I don't know what was in her head." "I have no further questions for this witness, Your Honor," Arrington said, turning his back on Collins with deliberate disrespect. Judge Owen Pendleton glared down at the sweating officer. "You may step down, Officer Collins. I strongly suggest you remain in the courthouse building. Do not leave the premises." Collins practically fled the witness stand, keeping his head down as he passed the jury box. The disgust on their faces was palpable. "The state rests, Your Honor," Vargas murmured, barely rising from her chair. She had nothing left. Her star witness was a proven perjurer, and her case was a smoking crater. "Very well," Judge Pendleton adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Arrington, is the defense ready to proceed?" "We are, Your Honor." The defense calls Captain William Sterling to the stand. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. The murmurs in the gallery died instantly as a tall, broad-shouldered man strode down the center aisle. He was not wearing a civilian suit. He wore the immaculate, stark white uniform of a United States Navy captain. Rows of colorful ribbons stacked high on his left breast, topped by the gold trident insignia of a Navy SEAL. He walked with military precision, his polished black shoes clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor. He approached the clerk, raised his right hand, and swore the oath with a voice that commanded immediate respect. "State your name and occupation for the record," Arrington requested once the captain was seated. "William Thomas Sterling, Captain, United States Navy, currently serving as the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Group 2, based out of Joint Expeditionary Base Little Creek Fort Story." Arrington walked to the center of the floor. "Captain Sterling, do you know the defendant, Maya Reynolds?" Sterling turned his head and looked at Maya. For the first time all trial, a faint, respectful smile touched Maya's lips. Sterling nodded. "I do, intimately. Though her legal name in this court is Miss Reynolds, in my command, she is known as Commander Maya Reynolds." A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom. Jurors exchanged stunned looks. Prosecutor Vargas's pen slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the desk. "Could you elaborate on Commander Reynolds's role and history within the United States Navy?" Arrington asked. "Commander Reynolds is one of the most highly decorated operators in modern naval history," Sterling stated, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "She has served for 16 years. After the Pentagon lifted combat restrictions for women, she was among the first to successfully complete basic underwater demolition, SEAL training, Class 318. She is currently attached to the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, commonly referred to as DEVGRU or SEAL Team 6. The sheer weight of the revelation pressed the air out of the room. The woman Officer Collins had tried to paint as a frantic, erratic civilian was a Tier 1 counter-terrorism operator. Arrington nodded, pacing slowly. "Captain Sterling, we have introduced a real-world name into this record for context. Can you confirm where Commander Reynolds was returning from on the night of October 14th? "Yes. She was returning to Jacksonville from MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa. She had just concluded a highly classified strategic briefing with General Brian Fenton, the commander of United States Special Operations Command. She was driving a federally issued, unmarked fleet vehicle." "Does Commander Reynolds possess any training in hand-to-hand combat?" Arrington asked, allowing a hint of irony into his voice. Sterling permitted a grim half-smile. "Commander Reynolds is a certified master instructor in Naval Special Warfare Close-Quarters Combatives. She has neutralized active combatants in hostile environments across 3 continents. The restraint she showed in the video this court just witnessed is nothing short of extraordinary. Had she perceived Officer Collins as an enemy combatant rather than a misguided, aggressive domestic law enforcement officer, he would not be walking today. She utilized a standard Level 4 compliance hold specifically designed to subdue a threat without causing permanent anatomical damage." "Thank you, Captain," Arrington said softly. "Your witness, Miss Vargas." Vargas stood slowly. She looked at Captain Sterling, then at Maya, and finally at the jury. She shook her head. "No questions, Your Honor. The defense calls Commander Maya Reynolds to the stand," Arrington announced. Maya stood. She smoothed the front of her gray suit and walked to the witness box. Her movements were economic, entirely devoid of wasted energy. She took the oath and sat down, her posture perfectly erect, her dark eyes locking onto Arrington. "Commander Reynolds," Arrington began, "let's talk about the night of October 14th. Why did you pull over on Highway 41? "Because an emergency vehicle activated its lights and sirens behind me," Maya answered. Her voice was calm, resonant, and entirely steady. "I reduced my speed, engaged my turn signal, and pulled onto the shoulder at the safest available location, mile marker 114. Did you exit your vehicle immediately?" "Negative. I placed the vehicle in park, turned off the engine, turned on the interior dome light, and placed both hands on the steering wheel, per standard civilian interaction protocol with law enforcement." "What happened next?" Maya's gaze drifted toward the prosecution table, specifically to where Officer Collins was sitting in the front row of the gallery, sweating through his uniform shirt. Officer Collins approached my vehicle. He did not ask for my license or registration. He forcefully pulled the driver's side door open, reached inside, grabbed me by my hair and the collar of my jacket, and pulled me onto the highway. "Were you afraid for your life, Commander?" "I am trained to manage fear," Maya replied clinically. I recognized an immediate, unprovoked kinetic threat. My objective was to neutralize the threat and de-escalate the situation while preserving the life of the aggressor. When he raised his right arm to strike me, I intercepted his radial nerve, hyperextended his wrist to force compliance, and swept his center of gravity. I pinned him to the ground until backup arrived to take custody of the situation. Arrington walked back to his table and picked up a small, black external hard drive. "Commander, Captain Sterling testified that you were driving a federally issued fleet vehicle. Are these vehicles equipped with standard civilian dash cameras?" Maya shook her head. "No. Vehicles assigned to DevGru officers transporting Level 5 classified intelligence are equipped with Palantir integrated continuous surveillance systems. These systems do not record to a local memory card. They encrypt and live stream audio, video, and GPS telemetry directly to a secure Department of Defense server via satellite uplink. They cannot be turned off, and their data cannot be destroyed by a passing semi-truck." The blood completely vanished from Officer Collins's face. He looked like a man staring down the barrel of a loaded gun. "Your Honor," Arrington said, holding up the drive. "The defense submits Exhibit E, the decrypted audio file from Commander Reynolds' vehicle, subpoenaed directly from the Department of Defense." Judge Pendleton didn't even look at Vargas for an objection. Admitted, "Play it." Arrington plugged the drive into the laptop. The courtroom speakers crackled to life with the sound of heavy, pounding rain. Then, the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of heavy boots approaching on wet asphalt. The audio was crystal clear. Sound of a car door handle being aggressively yanked. Collins's voice audio, "Get out of the car, you stupid bitch." Sound of a scuffle, a brief tearing of fabric. Maya's voice audio, remarkably calm. "Officer, I am complying. Remove your hands from me." Collins's voice audio, escalating, heavily breathing. "Shut your mouth. You people think you own the damn road. I'm going to teach you a lesson right now. You piece of..." The racial slur that followed echoed off the wood-paneled walls of the courtroom. Several jurors visibly recoiled. Judge Pendleton's face hardened into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Sound of a sudden, sharp thud. A gasp of pain from Collins. The sound of a heavy body hitting the wet pavement. Maya's voice, audio. Threat neutralized. "Officer, do not reach for your weapon. Do not move. Backup is en route." Collins's voice audio, groaning in pain. "My arm. You broke my arm, you crazy." Maya's voice audio, sharp, commanding. "I said, do not move. If you attempt to access your holster, I will dislocate your shoulder. Breathe. Wait for your colleagues." The audio hissed with static, and the sound of the rain for another 3 minutes before Arrington paused the playback. "Commander Reynolds," Arrington said softly, looking at the jury, who were staring at Maya with a mixture of awe and profound respect. "Did you assault Officer Collins?" "No, sir," Maya replied. "I survived him." Arrington nodded. "No further questions." Judge Pendleton didn't wait for Vargas. He slammed his gavel down with the force of a thunderclap. "Court is in recess for 30 minutes, the judge barked, his voice trembling with rage. He pointed a long, shaking finger directly at Officer Bradley Collins in the gallery. "Bailiff, take Officer Collins into custody immediately. The charge is perjury in a felony proceeding, a third-degree felony in the state of Florida. I am also recommending the state attorney's office file immediate charges for aggravated assault under color of law and a federal civil rights violation." 2 court bailiffs immediately moved toward Collins, who was frozen in his seat. They grabbed him by the arms, hauling the large man to his feet. "Hands behind your back," the older bailiff ordered, pulling out a pair of heavy steel handcuffs. As the ratcheting sound of the cuffs locking around Collins's wrists filled the room, he locked eyes with Maya Reynolds one last time. There was no smirk now. There was only the shattered, terrified realization that he had picked the wrong victim, spun a web of lies, and caught himself directly in the center of it. Maya did not gloat. She simply watched him being led away, her expression as calm and unreadable as the ocean before a storm. The phantom he had tried to invent had disappeared, replaced by the crushing weight of reality and the undeniable, hard-hitting force of absolute karma. Judge Owen Pendleton returned to the bench precisely 30 minutes later. The atmosphere in courtroom 302 had irreversibly shifted. The heavy, oppressive tension of a potential wrongful conviction had evaporated, replaced by the crackling, electric aftermath of a profound reckoning. The jury box was full. The gallery was whispering furiously, but the prosecution table felt entirely hollow. Pendleton adjusted his microphone, his face carved from granite. He looked directly at the 12 men and women of the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pendleton began, his voice ringing with a solemn, heavy timbre. "In my 22 years presiding over this court, I have rarely witnessed such a flagrant, malicious abuse of the judicial process. You were brought here today to weigh the facts of a criminal case. Instead, you were subjected to a calculated, perjured fabrication designed to destroy the life of an innocent woman, a woman who has dedicated her life to defending the very freedoms we exercise in this room." He turned his gaze down to Jessica Vargas. The prosecutor looked physically ill, her eyes fixed firmly on the mahogany table. "The state's case is completely, entirely devoid of merit, built on a foundation of absolute falsehoods," Pendleton continued, slamming his hand flat against his desk. "Therefore, I am granting the defense's motion for a directed verdict. The charges of aggravated assault, resisting arrest, and reckless driving against Commander Maya Reynolds are hereby dismissed with prejudice. They can never be brought again. Commander, you are completely exonerated, and you are free to go. This court owes you a profound apology." Maya Reynolds simply nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor." As the gavel fell, formally ending the trial, David Arrington closed his leather briefcase with a satisfying snap. He extended a hand to Maya, a wide, genuine smile breaking across his weathered face. "It was an absolute honor, Commander." "The honor was mine, Mr. Arrington," Maya replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Your investigative work was flawless." Before they could pass the wooden bar to leave, Jessica Vargas stepped into the aisle, blocking their path. The aggressive, confident prosecutor from that morning was gone. In her place stood a thoroughly defeated attorney whose career had just suffered a catastrophic, self-inflicted wound. "Commander Reynolds," Vargas said, her voice shaking slightly. I had no idea. The police report, the sworn affidavits, I relied on them. If I had known the truth about that night, or who you were, I never would have brought this case to trial. I am truly sorry." Maya stopped. She didn't look angry. She looked completely analytical, assessing Vargas the way a surgeon assesses a complex fracture. "Ignorance is not an excuse for destroying a life, Miss Vargas," Maya said, her tone perfectly even, cutting through the quiet courtroom like a scalpel. "You didn't look deeper because the narrative fit your conviction rate. I have the United States Department of Defense, a Tier 1 legal team, and classified satellite telemetry to prove my innocence. But what about the single mother working 2 jobs? What about the college student who can't afford Mr. Arrington? They don't have Palantir integrated dash cams to save them when an officer like Bradley Collins decides to lie." Vargas swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes, unable to formulate a defense. "Do better, counselor," Maya advised coldly, "because the next person he targeted wouldn't have survived." With that, Commander Maya Reynolds walked out of the Duval County Courthouse, stepping into the warm Florida sunlight, leaving the wreckage of Bradley Collins's lies behind her. But the wreckage was only just beginning to burn. The karma Maya unleashed was not merely a localized event. It became a sweeping, institutional inferno. Within 48 hours, the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Civil Rights Division in Jacksonville opened a massive, sprawling probe into Officer Bradley Collins. The audio of him using a racial slur before initiating an unprovoked physical assault triggered immediate federal interest. He was officially charged under Title 18 U.S. C. Section 242, Deprivation of Rights, under color of law. The local blue wall of silence crumbled instantly. The local police union, seeing the irrefutable Department of Defense footage and the federal indictments, publicly abandoned him. Collins was fired, stripped of his pension, and formally evicted from the fraternity of law enforcement. But the hardest blow came from the public defender's office. Armed with the undeniable proof that Collins was a willing and practiced perjurer, an emergency task force was formed to audit his entire 12-year career. Over 140 criminal convictions, where Collins was the primary arresting officer or sole witness, were dragged back into the light. Dozens of inmates, people who had pleaded guilty simply because it was their word against a decorated officer's, filed immediate appeals. The city of Jacksonville braced for tens of millions of dollars in civil rights lawsuits. 14 months later, the final hammer fell in a stark, heavily guarded federal courtroom. Bradley Collins stood before a federal judge, dressed not in a crisp, authoritative uniform, but in the drab, oversized orange jumpsuit of a federal inmate. His wrists and ankles were shackled with heavy steel chains. He had lost 30 pounds. The arrogant, imposing bully who had sworn to ruin Maya Reynolds' life was gone, replaced by a hollow, terrified man staring down the barrel of a ruined existence. He pleaded guilty to federal civil rights violations and multiple counts of aggravated perjury, desperately trying to avoid a longer sentence. "Mr. Collins," the federal judge stated, looking down at him with pure disgust, "you used a badge, a symbol of public trust, as a weapon of personal malice and racial prejudice. You believed your authority made you untouchable. You were wrong." Collins was sentenced to 96 months, 8 solid years in the Federal Correctional Complex in Coleman, Florida. There would be no early parole. There would be no second chances. He would serve his time in a facility filled with men he had helped put away, stripped of all power, all dignity, and all respect. On the day Bradley Collins was loaded onto a federal transport bus, his hands securely locked in the very same type of iron cuffs he used to terrorize innocent citizens, Commander Maya Reynolds was entirely unaware. She wasn't watching the news. She wasn't celebrating his downfall. She was thousands of miles away, strapped into the cargo bay of a C-130 Hercules aircraft soaring 30,000 feet over the Arabian Sea. The green glow of the jump light illuminated her calm, focused face as she checked her parachute harness, surrounded by her fellow operators. She had a real mission to execute, real threats to neutralize, and a country to protect. The phantom cop who tried to break her was nothing more than a faded, insignificant memory in the rearview mirror of an extraordinary life. True power does not need to boast, and justice, while sometimes blind, is rarely deaf. Officer Collins sought to ruin a life to inflate his own ego, only to shatter his own reality against an unbreakable wall of discipline. Commander Reynolds walked away a silent victor, proving that the heaviest karma always falls on those who mistake quiet restraint for helpless weakness.